You're listening to Do That Well with your hosts, Brenda Brown and Karen Thrall, a podcast about real experiences and how to turn them into life lessons. Unscripted, honest, funny, genuine, and passionate. A series of conversations where we explore every aspect of human interaction and provoke each other to do life well. This month of March is National Women's Month, and next Tuesday, March 8th, is specifically International Women's Day. And I was just going down this rabbit hole of thinking about this. And so I came to you, Karen, and I was like, what do you think about doing an episode on this? And it's just going to be a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. And the fun part too is we didn't do any prep. So this is just our own personal journeys, our own personal thoughts. And it gives us a chance to share what it means to be strong from our point of view. And what's cool is we may differ. We don't know. We're going to find out. We may feel the same. We may differ. We'll
Yeah,
see.
it'll be fun.
Mm, yeah.
During this conversation, I'm going to be using the word
Yes.
women, but I am not trying to exclude anyone else that would consider themselves to be a part of this group. So
Mm,
I want to
okay.
start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but right off the cuff, before I go any further, Karen, I'm just curious in your life what you think of when you think of the word femininity or feminine.
Hmm. Okay, well, the first thing I think about in most languages, most romantic languages, there is a masculine and a feminine. So a table is feminine, but a book is masculine, so you have like el libro, or, is the book. So there is a lot of that that the feminine and masculine. So I've always viewed femininity as part of it's interwoven in all our lives. I don't I don't see it as a gender thing. I see it as a part of who we all are. There's a feminine side to life. And so I like that you actually use the word feminine because I'm really drawn to that where there's a feminine side to life and everyone's welcome into that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you're right, like just like in the Latin languages and French, and there is this masculine feminine constantly in and out woven through everything. And so it's fun to talk about the feminine attributes, and I do have a lot to say on it. So I know we only had 30 minutes, but so that's my first thought.
I so appreciate that you said all of that because I'm sure you'll notice that I started this off by saying, it's Women's Day. And then I quickly went into, but I don't want this to only be for people that are women.
Yeah,
And then I started talking
yeah.
about femininity. And there's a reason that I went about it in that way. And it's because I am like in total agreement with you, Karen.
Mm,
When I look at my life and when I look at the people around me, regardless of their parts or how they identify, I am a very strong believer that all humans possess masculine and feminine traits and qualities and energies, whatever you want to call it. And in my mind, I view it like a spectrum, right? And so some people are going to be really far to the feminine side, some people are going to be really far to the masculine side, some people are going to be in between. But
mhm.
just because I am a person that identifies as a woman, that doesn't necessarily mean that I have 100% feminine traits and qualities, right?
Mm, mhm. Yes.
So I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Boy, and I do it in coaching a lot, because a lot of times we're attracted to the opposite, and so people will use generic terms. Well, that means all men are this way, or all are this way, and it's actually they're talking about a feminine trait or a masculine trait.
Right.
And I do want to point out, well, in your experience, it might appear that all men are this way or whatever, but actually there's a masculine and a feminine approach, and you're going to lean more to one another, to one to the other. So I find it really opens up a conversation to be able to draw from.
One of the things that is at the forefront of my mind when I think about what it means to be a strong female is or a strong woman, is I think the very first thing that comes to my mind is I think of these things like being strong is you're going to be a big presence. And I don't know why, but that's just something that I think
Mm,
of when I think of strong people.
mm,
Like I think
mm.
of people with big personalities. But that is shortly followed by this secondary thought of like, but is that a feminine quality? I don't know. Is
Wow.
that, and so then I start to think of, well, in our society, when we think of strength, I think a lot of times we equate more masculine attributes with strength. So
Mm,
what does it mean then to have feminine attributes and be strong? And for
mm,
me, one of those things is nurturing. When I think of very
mm,
nurturing individuals, to me, that's like a very feminine quality to be very nurturing. And I do think that it is really, really strong.
mm.
Um, yes.
Okay. 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 So again, I've been put on the spot, right? So I am going to be winging this big time. Okay. So strength, I don't see it as a masculine word. But I do see it as components of strength. So I can see why, I totally can see why the impression of strength is more masculine. Uh, Maybe when it comes to brawn,
Mhm.
the
Exactly.
masculine, the strength of I can lift 300 pounds kind of strong.
Right.
I could see that. So, but yes, if you think physical strength, that tends to be more masculine. That tends to be a more masculine. And when I think of mental strength, emotional strength, soul like strength, confidence strength, presence strength, is that a feminine thing?
Mhm. Mhm.
So for a
Fair.
woman of strength, I I don't care if she's physically strong. That's awesome if she is. But when I think of a woman of strength, I think she walks in the room and there's something, you can feel it, you know it, you recognize it, but you may not call it strong. So maybe stuff like that. Like when you
Yeah.
see a woman overcome and it was a hard road, there's something about a woman who stands back up and goes, mm-mm, mm-mm. And, I think that to me is like, wow. And I'll stop there. And then I want to talk about the nurturing thing you said. So,
Okay.
okay.
So what's really cool actually is that I actually didn't necessarily even mean like physical strength. I was
Oh,
thinking more like
okay.
a big presence in
Oh,
their
right.
personality.
Right. You
But
did say that.
I
You did
do
say
like
that.
what you said because I'm already seeing here there's like so many buckets that we can filter this through because there's the bucket of are we talking about physical strength or are we talking about mental and emotional strength? And right there we're kind of placing this like physical strength as a masculine,
Mm,
emotional as more of a feminine. But then if you look at the feminine, or excuse me, if you look at the more like emotional mental strength, I think even within that bucket it can be further divvied up into what's more of a masculine or like feminine characteristic. But I'm going to volley back to you with the nurturing thing.
okay. But this is so good. So we have physical strength, we have presence strength, we have emotional strength, we have mental strength, we have inner person strength, inner strength.
Hmm.
We have strength of a voice. So we have different strengths. And then you mentioned nurturing is strength. So another example of strong is one who knows how to nurture another human.
Hmm.
I know you're strong when you have eyes. That's very powerful, actually, Brenda. I know you are strong by how you care. You either emotionally, physically care for someone else.
Hmm.
Because only strong people would, someone of strength would turn their eyes to somebody else to nurture them.
Hmm. In my opinion, right.
Yeah.
Because the way I see it, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before on our podcast before as well, but this idea of like, you can't really be there for other people if you yourself aren't like
Ooh.
whole and taken care of, or and
Ooh.
so in my mind, I think the reason that I see being nurturing as something that is strong is because for you to be able to like hold space for others and to be able to look out for somebody else in addition to yourself, like that's difficult. That's
Mm,
that
that is
requires
true.
that requires strength, because that means that you are holding yourself and you're holding for others, right?
Wow. Okay. Um, all right. So I want to, I have another concept of strong I'll throw out
Yes.
here. And that's, I was thinking about you're placed into a family unit. Can't control that. This is your
Mm.
family unit. You are a helpless baby who needs to be cared for, which is where your thing of nurturing. So you're placed in a family unit, a culture, a mindset, a worldview, economically. You're going to be placed in. None of that is in your control. None of it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll give you an example. My parents, in my opinion, I don't know if my siblings, I think they would agree, me to be fiercely independent. Now, they would never use those words ever in a million years, but I can stand on my own 2 feet. And I look at my siblings, we are all very independent. What a strength. So it means I can walk off my map. I can make decisions that maybe are uncomfortable. I can take risks. I'm okay. If nobody comes with me, I'll still do it. Like I have some independence.
Right.
What a strong trait to train. And also what a downfall, a detriment,
Hmm.
because I am independent. And the need to be nourished by another, the need to be nurtured by another, I'm going to be guarded.
Right.
And no, I'm fine. I'm fine. No, I don't need your help.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need anybody's help. You know,
Right.
that is not how my family, my parents intended. I love that they taught me independence. I do, because it taught me accountability, self direction. But the detriment is I'm not really prone to being community. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a daily friend I hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ask for help. I maybe my pride, I have a bit more pride. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to throw that's one thought I had about strength, about our family and what we get raised as a gold nugget, but I have to also deconstruct some mindsets in me.
Totally. So I feel like you unintentionally touched on what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about when I think of strength in our society. I think this is a societal thing. And again, this is
Wow.
purely my perception and opinion. But I do think societally, there's a bit of this idea that like strength are these more masculine leaning uh, characteristics. So we would have like independence, being really independent so that you don't need anyone, so that you don't have to rely on somebody else's nurturing, right? That's like a form of strength. I think of my mother and my own experience growing up. Um, we don't need to get into the details behind it, but for my mom, she was raised to believe that like having emotions and displaying intense emotion, it was a sign of weakness. So it was
Yes.
very ingrained in me from a young age, like you need to be strong. You can't show emotions because that's not strong. It's weak. And now that I'm older, I'm starting to look at that and I'm like, well, who said that? Society told me that emotions were weak, but like emotions are this really feminine thing and they're very powerful, and it's actually very strong. It's very strong to be in touch with your emotions, in my opinion. Like that is a strength. That is a strength that like feminine people with more feminine, character qualities have, and it is a strong sign of strength. And like, is independence strong? Yeah, it is still strong, but it doesn't mean it's the only way that we can be strong, right? Like
Yeah.
being devoid of emotion isn't the only way that one can be strong. We can have strength in these other ways of being, like you were saying, maybe you missed out on like community. Well, community is another thing, in my opinion, that is a more of like a female leaning characteristic, to
Mm.
be very like in touch with community and want to forge connections with other people. And again, like that is a strength. That's a strength that we can have, but our society would kind of lead us to believe that perhaps it's not. um, so I know that I made a lot of generalizations just now, but I did that for the sake of trying to get my point across. um, but that's kind of where, as I was listening to you, that's where my mind started to go. This idea of, okay, you were totally touching on what I was trying to articulate without realizing you were doing it. But um, yes, just this idea that there are all these things that, in my opinion, are more feminine characteristics, but they are really strong. But it's perhaps not the status quo for what we think of when we think of strength.
This is so good. Okay, so I have two thoughts. One is, for sake of time, the opposite of independence is dependence. The beauty of is interdependence. So there's independent, dependent, interdependent. Where
Mm-hmm.
right, and I don't want to come across dependent. Is dependence looked as feminine and weak? And independence, is it looked on as more masculine and strong, or in that, just the feminine masculine? I don't know.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
However, so I like what you're saying there. And so I want to go to what you said, because I was thinking the same thing about emotions. So emotions are stoic emotions is masculine, emoting emotions, expressing emotions is feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And I never understood that, because
Right.
I can see emotions in everybody.
Yes.
I feel the same amount of emotion lives inside people, just because they may not express it. It's like, no, that's inside you. I can see.
Right.
So how did emotion become feminine?
Right.
Okay, so let me narrow it in here. So far, what's naturally coming out of our conversation is emotions. We've talked about emotions. We've talked about nurturing. And we've talked about, well, I brought up independence. So we have those three so far. So if we pull those in, um, when it comes to nurturing, I love what you said. When you are caring for yourself and you have enough, you can hold space to care for someone else. That's strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very empowering phrase for everybody to walk away with. And I think for someone like me, where my mom is unbelievably nurturing, but somehow for me, I associate nurturing as weak
Hmm.
for some reason, which I don't know why, which I'll have to go back to therapy to find out. But I really like how you said nurturing is, if you can care for yourself and hold space for somebody else, then you are strong. You're strong. So I love that. So that calling this International National Day of Women or International Day of Women of remember nurturing's cool.
It is. Yeah.
Nurturing's awesome. So when it comes to independence, well, did you want to say anything before I go to the independence?
No. Good.
Okay, so
Keep moving.
independence is maybe what I would say is, when you are independent, that is applauded as strong, and maybe the challenge there is, remember, true strength and independence is interdependence. True strength and independence is be able to ask and hold out your hand for someone to to support you. So
Mm-hmm.
this thing of, I'm fine, I'm on my own, I don't need any support, I don't need any help, I've got this, I'm good, no, no, thank you, no, thank you. That doesn't necessarily mean that's strong.
Right.
Strong is being able to make a decision for yourself, being able to make really sound choices, and to go, can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, that is very strong, because you have to take your pride out of the way and
Right.
say, so.
And I do feel that that's where that community aspect comes into mind as well, or comes into play, because when you are in this place of being independent, but then also recognizing that perhaps you do need help, or perhaps you should reach out, or whatever it may be, that's when you then start ticking in on this idea of community and being able to like forge connection, right? And I know we talked about that just briefly, how that, in my opinion, is also another more feminine leaning quality that is very strong, like the ability to be able to create camaraderie and connection and um network in that way. It makes me think of, I don't know, like the 1890s or whatever, right? And how it's like, the women were the ones that were always like networking and like introducing their husbands to each other so that they could then like make business deals and so on and so forth. I'm probably romanticizing it and dumbing it down, but there was this idea, like that was the strength, like that was the strength of the like women in that community, was that they were actually the ones that were really good at creating connection and networking and finding like different avenues for their husbands to then have like different business arrangements. So there was a quiet strength in that.
So then would that mean that connecting, networking is a feminine approach?
I think it is. That's my opinion, but I think that that is a
That's
more
cool.
feminine thing. Yes. Or characteristic. Yes.
That's very cool. I like that. I like
Um,
that as quality like that. That's very popular in the United States is networking,
yeah.
building connection. But I never saw it as possibly a feminine strength.
Yeah. I view it as such. I mean, I think
I like that.
when we're looking at, very stereotypical archetypes of masculine and feminine, I
Yeah,
think anyhow.
I like it. Okay, so can we go back to the emotion one
Yes.
that you were talking about earlier? Okay, I had some thoughts on this, and one thing I have seen in me growing as a woman is I went through stages. I emoted, I was expressive, and then I wasn't, and then with certain people I was, and in certain situations I wasn't, and then I was a lot, and I noticed when I really let myself go for it, my creativity started coming out more. Like the more I express myself emotionally, the more ideas, creative, arts, I just innovation. I found that it actually opened that whole world up to me because I allowed my
Mm.
emotions to be free.
Wow.
And then you and then I think what happens is if you go through a painful thing, your emotions become raw because you're in pain.
Hmm.
And then that raw emotion isn't very attractive necessarily. And so then it gets labeled as weakness
Right.
because the pain is causing raw emotion. So now my emotions show me as weak.
Hmm.
So then you shut it down because you don't want to come across weak. So therefore, I will try to hold it together and not show my emotions. And it's like this vicious circle from when I was little to today.
Hmm.
And the reason I want to say all that is, however, if it wasn't for all those highs and lows and those emotions, I would not have been learned how to mature them.
Hmm.
And my journey today is yes and. Yes, I am emotional and I am wise. Yes, I am emotional and I am intelligent. Yes, I am emotional and I am carefree. Yes, I'm emotional and I feel pain. Like I think I'm at a place in my life where the topic of emotion isn't isolated to I'm an emotional person or or whatever. I think it's just yes and.
Hmm.
So I wanted to throw that back at you.
Well, it's funny as you say that. The first thing that comes to mind as I was listening is like, is that what feminine strength is? Is feminine strength yes and? Is it like, yes, I can be emotional and I'm still strong? Yes, I can be nurturing And that is strength. You know what I mean? Like, is it just a matter of reframing? Like, and just saying, like, yes, and it can be strong. And I don't know, there's something kind of beautiful about that.
I like that because you can also, like, if somebody's feeling emotional, what does it look like when you're emotionally strong? Tell me a memory when you're emotionally strong. So they draw that resource. And so nothing changes. They just don't sacrifice their inner strength.
Right.
I think you're right. We have to tear down this belief system. The emotions are not strength.
Right. Or that
Like
nurturing
I
strength, or that,
yeah,
or that independence, or being,
is
or having community isn't strength, or, whatever, or needing community. Like, maybe you don't want to be independent and you're somebody that needs community, but that can still be strong. I don't know.
yes. And if you go through, like, if I go back to my independent thing, um, it's really truly it's me that somehow disconnected independence and community. Somehow because I'm my own person, my own thinking, somehow I disconnected independence with community. So yes, and would be I am independent and I welcome community,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and I think even in that, so for us who have a label of strength, but it's incomplete.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're independent and you and cling to community. It's incomplete, and so it really welcomes. Like, I don't have to shame myself or say feel bad. I just have to welcome welcome it all.
Right. Yeah. I like this. I feel like, well, we are running out of time, but I feel like we're landing in this place. We've gone many places on this journey today, but I feel like we're landing in this idea that, um at least for me, it seems like we're starting to identify that feminine strength, for the purposes of this conversation, seems to be this idea of when you're like holding more than one thing. It's like, it's that yes and
Nice,
it's,
nice,
can you have community and be independent? Can you be emotional and be strong? Can you find the strength in your nurturing, right? It's like, rather than having to have these really opposing viewpoints, like it's masculine strength, it's feminine strength, like, can it just be when you hold both things to be true? So
beautiful,
maybe feminine strength is like the ability to hold many viewpoints,
absolutely beautiful,
among other
absolutely
things.
beautiful.
Um,
Brenda, that's the close of our podcast. That's really truly that was beautiful.
I do have one image that came to mind that I want to share as a
Mm,
one last thing, because I think I like it as an image. As you were talking about emotions, I had the image of water come to me, and the ocean specifically. And I think of our emotions like the ocean, like they're rolling and they're fluid and it's always moving. And sometimes there's a storm and there's going to be these big waves and like these big outbursts of emotion. And sometimes it's really calm. And those are like the stoic emotional times. But how strong is the ocean and like water? And think of what a force, what a
wow,
natural force that is.
that's
Our emotions are strong.
amazing.
They're strong.
Wow, nice, really well said. Yeah.
So,
Okay,
well, that was our
Brenda,
conversation on
Brenda, Brenda, Brenda,
strength,
Brenda.
feminine strength.
What? That was great.
But I had a lot of fun. Thank you for entertaining me, Karen, and jumping onto this topic that we had no prep for. I
No
had a
prep.
really fun conversation
It
and
was. I learned a
learned
lot.
a lot. So
Yeah, I
thank
did.
you. And thank
Okay,
you all for
Brenda.
listening.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Hugs.